And this reminded me of what they had studied in Italy, where they fed mice genetically modified soy, and they also had changes in their testicles, including damage to the young sperm cells. Now, if you're damaging the young sperm cells, it could result in one of two things. It could result in infertility or problems with the offspring. Well, it appears that they may have had both. In fact, with the mice, they looked at the offspring, and they took the embryos out of the pregnant mothers after, very, very young embryos, and they looked at how the DNA was functioning. And they compared the DNA of those who were born to GM soy-fed parents versus those who were fed to non-GM soy, and the DNA functioned differently. So we're seeing a fundamental change in the offspring of mice that were fed genetically modified soy, whose parents were fed genetically modified soy.
Interesting observation. Now, it's quite concerning to hear these startling results and the the impact of feeding these foods to animals, laboratory animals.
It's not just soy either. I mean, the Austrian government did one of the very few long-term feeding studies before this hamster study, and they found that when they fed genetically modified corn to mice, the longer they fed the corn, the fewer the babies the mice had, and the smaller the babies were.
Well, these startling results are certainly significant, and there's a term in law, it's called the res ipsa loquitur, the facts speak for themselves, and these are really very significant issues going on. But I'm wondering, just out of a personal scientific curiosity, as to any speculation you might have as to what the actual mechanism is. Is it the fact that these crops are contaminated with pesticides? Is it because the DNA is altered in the crops, or what seems to be triggering this infertility?
Well, the process of genetic engineering leads to massive collateral damage in the DNA and causes an increase or decrease in a whole host of compounds, as well as the production of completely novel compounds that didn't exist in the plant before. So it's really a thing to consider. Now, we know that we're seeing the genetically modified soy causing these problems in the hamsters and the rats and the mouse. Now, the corn was genetically modified both to produce a toxin called Bt, which normally kills insects, and also it was Roundup ready, so it can be sprayed with Roundup. Now, if we look at the livestock that are showing reproductive problems, we see that more associated with the Bt, or the pesticide-producing corn or cottonseed. There was a farmer called Jerry Roseman, who's a friend of mine in central Iowa. He had trouble getting his pigs pregnant, and he tried all sorts of things, brought in all sorts of experts, veterinarians, supplement experts, feed experts. He finally traced the problem to genetically modified corn and found that 2 or 3 of his neighbors were having the same problems and feeding the same corn. So he reported it to the newspapers and magazines, and every time, or even a TV show, every time it was reported, more and more farmers called Jerry up and said, I saw that show, and I'm having the same problem, and I also am using genetically modified corn. Now, coincidentally, researchers at Baylor College of Medicine accidentally discovered that rats that were raised on corn cob bedding, which was probably corn cob crushed right near Jerry's house, were also showing problems with reproductive behavior. The females would stop their cycling, the males would stop their sexual behavior. It also was they found that there were 2 types of sexual effective compounds that were able to cause problems at 200-fold lower concentrations than classical phytoestrogens. And they found that there was a difference in the amount of these compounds depending on whether something was genetically modified or not. So it's possible in this case with the corn that there was some of this problem, this compound that curtailed sexual behavior and sexual activity could have been increased in the corn, which caused the problems in the animals. But in India, we find buffalo that eat genetically modified cottonseed most of them are suffering from reproductive problems, including infertility, frequent abortions, premature deliveries, as well as prolapsed uteruses, and also deaths among both the adults and the young buffaloes. So it's hard to say because it's happening with soy and corn and cotton, and we don't know because what happened to Mercola in terms of stopping her follow-up has happened over and over and over again. Whenever a scientist discovers a problem, mysteriously their funding disappears, or they get fired, or they're told to move to a different project, and so we don't have in hand the kind of scientific tools to properly answer that question.
Okay, so it really doesn't matter anyway, because the end result is what we're looking to achieve, and it's just really a personal curiosity to document this. But it's a big challenge, there's no question, and as the evidence continues to pour in, I think there's more and more documentation of supporting these concerns. So it's just wonderful to have a resource like you who can actually go to these conferences, discuss and connect and communicate with the experts who are doing the research, and then share that information with us, and really inspire and motivate us to continue to share this information with their friends and family and the community, because the real key to this, as you mentioned earlier, is not going to be through the government. The political lobbyists have effectively manipulated the Monsanto shills to be within the very core of Obama's administration, and there's no way we're going to have the government is going to rescue from this. It has to come from the consumers. And so is education, and we have to continue to educate and spread the word, and continue to spread the word, and make the choice with our pocketbook, and really avoid any of these foods that are genetically modified. And
what we have is a non-GMO shopping guide at non-GMOshoppingguide.com, and that makes it much easier. I know because I travel all over the country. I travel, about 160, 170 days a year. And so eating out in restaurants, you can avoid GMOs, but you have to know what to look for. There's 8 genetically modified food crops. There's soy, corn, cottonseed, which is used in oil, as well as the canola oil. There's sugar from sugar beets. Then there's papaya from Hawaii, and a little bit of zucchini and crookneck squash. Now, unfortunately, the soy and the corn derivatives are practically omnipresent in processed foods. But we list the different derivatives in the shopping guide, and most effectively, we actually list hundreds of brand products in 22 food categories that are non-GMO. So people will need to take the documentation into the supermarket and figure out which brands will work for them that are non-GMO, and then they can then replace the products in their cupboard with healthier, non-genetically modified products. Not only does that protect us, but as you said so beautifully, it creates a pressure on the marketplace. And this is not a vague, not well understood pressure by the food industry. This pressure is already creating a change. The fastest growing claim among store brands in 2009 was GMO-free. And Supermarket News, which is a trade journal that's used for predictions for the food industry, predicted that because of our shopping guide, non-GMOshoppingguide.com, as well as a new third-party verified system for making non-GMO claims called the Non-GMO Project, because of our 2 new websites and programs, they said that 2010 will see an unprecedented upsurge of consumer awareness and concern about GMOs, and we're linking that with trans fats and carbs and salt and sugar, which has changed the way that companies produced food in the past. So they are basically saying that if things move along the way that they're predicting, we may see a tipping point. And this is my word, a tipping point of consumer rejection, which we think can be achieved when as little as 5% of U.S. shoppers avoid GM ingredients. We can drive it out of the market, as happened in Europe when they reached their tipping point in April of 1999 because of high-profile coverage in the media. Within a single week, virtually every major food company committed to stop using GM ingredients, and that's what's kept it out of that context.